Ready when you are, Jewel.
All right. If you'd like to go ahead and open the meeting, then I'll do my statement.
Okay,
Jewel, we really need Jennifer for this. So if we could just wait a minute maybe and see if we can get Jennifer
sure.
to join.
Would it be okay to go ahead and read the opening statements? And then, or would you rather wait on that?
Jewel, go ahead and do the opening statements. She doesn't have to be on for that.
Excuse me. Good morning, board, staff, and members of the public. After my statement, the chairman will open this meeting and explain the rules for the electronic meeting. Please keep your microphones on mute while you are not speaking. The technical support team may proactively mute participants if the microphone is picking up background noise. Board members should check to make sure the microphone is not muted before speaking. You may text me at 540-336-3948 at any time during the meeting if you need technical support, and an IT tech will call your cell phone to assist. I now turn the meeting over to Committee Chairman Kelly.
Good morning, everyone. In accordance with the Governor's State of Emergency Declaration and executive orders regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, our Loudoun County Board of Supervisors Continuity Ordinance and General Assembly 2020 Budget Amendment 28 and 137. Loudoun Water will meet today in an electronic meeting. In compliance with the special procedures, only action items necessary to continue operations of Loudoun Water and the discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities will be discussed during today's meeting. Reports and other meeting information are available on board docs. Public notice and meeting access information was provided on the Loudoun Water website. A recording of the meeting will be available at this link, www.loudounwater.org/virtual-meeting-recordings. Board members wishing to speak are reminded to press unmute and identify themselves by name so that staff can accurately capture comments. All items will be recommended to the March 11th, 2021 board meeting. The board secretary will now take a roll call attendance of the committee members. Jewel?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kelly?
Present.
Mr. Sultan?
Present.
Mr. Bonfils?
Present.
Mr. Kobless? I think you're muted, sir.
Another rookie mistake. Can you believe it? Am I actually on this committee? I didn't realize that. I'm glad I showed up.
Yes.
No, I wouldn't miss the meeting. It's good to know that I'm in. I didn't know I was on the committee.
Okay.
I put myself on the committee and I don't even remember.
I'll send you the committee chart.
No, I got it.
Okay. And Jennifer, I see that you're on now. I just want to confirm that you can hear us and we can hear you.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. And I can hear you. Good morning.
Beautiful. Thank you. Good morning. All right. Ready to go.
Okay. Morning, Jennifer. Welcome. Glad you could join us. Sean Kelly. All right. Let's see. We have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Okay, did I hear Mr. Sultan with the motion?
Yeah.
And Mark second? Okay. Very good.
Take
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Sultan?
Yes.
Mr. Bonfils?
Yes.
And Mr. Kobless?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move down to information and educational items. Brian, I guess we'll kick it off with you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, sir. So the purpose of this meeting today is to provide an overview of the 2020 audit process that's being conducted by Yount, Hyde & Barbour. Joining us today is Jennifer Files from YHB. She is here and she'll review the scope and extent of the 2020 audit. Included in your committee package today was the pre-audit communication letter that's provided for your reference. We can pull that up at any time. Just let Michael know if you want to take a look at that. One of the things that Jennifer will be looking from you today is for any insight that you may have on an area that you would like to see them dive into a little more deeply. In the past, they've reviewed accounts payable, inventory, cybersecurity, Payroll, last year they did kind of an in-depth review and some changes we made to security due to personnel changes. The item that we're recommending for more of an in-depth review is any changes that we made to processes due to COVID. And most of the administrative staff has been working remotely for about a year now. And so as you can imagine, we've had to make some changes to our process to accommodate that. And so we feel that that would be a good area for them to dive into and identify any areas of concerns or improvements that they may have to those processes, so we can go ahead and get those corrected right now. Because I'm sure, as you can imagine, teleworking was probably something that will continue even when this is over, at least to some extent. And so having those controls in place would be a good idea. And finally, this is your opportunity to ask Jennifer any questions or bring up any concerns you may have regarding the 2020 audit. So with that, I will turn things over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone, for having us. I also want to add that I've asked Brian Newland, one of our risk advisory services IT partners, to also join us on the meeting. So he is on the call as well, because so much of the audit environment and the in your environment, the control environment, it surrounds the IT system. So we do include them as part of our team as we do most of our audits. As Brian mentioned, he stole all my thunder. It was a great summary. We do have the audit plan for the weeks of March 22nd and 29th. We've already started working with Brian and Eileen a little bit on understanding some of the changes that have taken place and some of the differences that they've experienced during the pandemic. And as he mentioned, we issued our pre-audit communication letter. I'd like to hit a couple of the highlights with you. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have read through that. That planning letter is important to make sure that we're on the same page for the audit process. First, with our process, we do get an understanding of your environment, of your operations, and your internal controls, and that helps us to identify risk of material misstatement. And identifying those risks helps us to design our test in response to those risks. The materiality is covered within the letter as well. It's considered both in planning and performing the audit. So more of our time and effort in our testing is spent on those areas that are either more material to Loudon Water as a whole or have a higher risk of a material misstatement from occurring within the financial statements. The risk assessment and the internal control understanding, it also helps us to craft the nature and the timing, not only the extent piece, but the nature and timing of our audit procedures. But it is important to note that we do not audit your internal control environment. We do not conduct an audit of internal controls, and we do not issue an opinion on your internal control environment. But we do a lot of this work to be able to properly plan and perform the financial statement audit. Your audit will again be conducted in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, with government auditing standards, as well as the specifications for boards, authorities, boards, and commissions that's issued in Virginia by the APA. And lastly, as Brian mentioned, in the process with our materiality and our planning process, our risk assessment, we do look at areas that could be of significant risk to the organization. There are a few that are prevalent in every organization, every size organization, every type of organization. And we've included those in our letter this year that we've met already to go through some of our pre-planning and our risk assessment. So those again include management override of control, fraudulent revenue recognition, and this year we also included, as Brian mentioned, possible control or process changes because of the pandemic. So with that, as Brian mentioned, we had talked a little bit about looking at a more in-depth level of those changes to make sure that you still have a solid and firm control environment because of the remote work environment, especially if this is an area that staff may want to consider, management may want to consider for Loudon Water employees moving forward. And with that, I'd love to open it up to any questions, concerns you may have, or thoughts or issues on this possible specific area this year.
Mr. Sultan, you have a question?
Yeah, just curious, given the remote location of most personnel, how do you do the audit in an environment like this? Do you need to have in-person meetings, or how does that work?
Well, it's been an interesting year for the audit process. Fortunately, our firm had invested in the technology to be able to conduct remote audit processes well before the pandemic occurred. So this positioned us to be able to, back March of 2020, we were able to step into the process fairly seamlessly, working out the kinks. It did force us to be a little more progressive in the audit process. But what we can do, we have some clients who prefer for us to be on site, and we have other clients who prefer, based on the safety and the size and space of their organization, for us to conduct in a remote manner. So in operating in more of a remote audit process, we still look at the same documentation, the same information. We ask the same questions we always have, but a lot of the communications are more of a face-to-face video call, such as this that we're doing now. But then the documentation, it comes to us, from the same staff that it had before. A lot of it through our secure portal, so the information is still maintained in a secure manner. There are certain pieces that we do have to see in, physical, paper, in-person view. So we do plan on having a 1 or 2 day visit to Loudon Water to be able to look at that pertinent information in person.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kelly has a question.
Thank you, Jewel. Hello again, Jennifer. Just back to what Brian has suggested, and you touched on it as well, to review, as he put it, the controls, given that we're in a remote environment. And I heard you say that you don't really review that. What would you specifically, and I think that's a good idea. I think we ought to look and see how things are working. High praise to Mike Beersley and his staff for making sure that everybody can work effectively from a remote location. But what would you be looking at? What would you be checking in our ability to work remotely?
Mm-hmm. So I think at this stage, and at the moment, we've talked about some of the areas where we think could have changed for you. We'll certainly dig in deeper with Brian and Eileen and the finance team, as well as those outside in operations, although I suspect your operations hasn't been as affected by a remote work environment as your administrative team may have been. We'll go through the things that have always been. There have been processes and controls in place for cash receipts, for disbursements, for certain approvals of reconciliations. We'll look at those as they were before, pre-March 2020, and then what has changed and what has happened because of the remote work environment from March until now. Certain parts of those are going to be more of a manual outside of the computer system review and approval process. And then there are probably going to be things that happen within the systems. And that's where Brian Newland and our risk advisory team will aid us in making sure that we're looking at both ends of both within and external from the IT systems. But we'll look at, some of the key functions of an internal control environment are making sure things are properly approved, whether it's something pre-approved before a purchase takes place, or whether it's a post, more of a detection review and approval. We'll look at what those look like now. For example, on site, cash receipts, that was a process that was done every single day in the same fashion. I suspect that, and based on our conversations so far with your accounting staff, that has changed. Maybe it's different personnel, maybe it's a different timeline, maybe it's not as frequently. Those are the types of things that we'll look at to see what's happening now and to make sure that the control environment is still strong, or if there are recommendations for how it should be strengthened if this were to continue more of a long-term basis.
Okay, thank you. And I had one other question unrelated to the first one. Are there any significant changes to GASB that this year that you'll be looking at?
So yes, there are things that are applicable for this year. Most GASB 95 issued a one-year extension for most of the GASB standards. So we will look at that with Brian and talk about any opportunity to implement standards this year that you may wish to early implement. But most of the standards that would have been applicable for 12/31/20 have been given a one-year extension. I don't know. I haven't talked to Brian yet to determine what may be implemented this year or what may sit for another year for implementation.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any areas of concern from committee members, things that you would like for us to look into specifically during this process?
I didn't have any of the committee members have any specific areas of interest or concerns?
No, I didn't.
Of course, this is Jim Bonfils.
Hi, Jim.
I'm always concerned about security, both on the IT side as well as our process control, SCADA, and I'm sure that that'll be part of your review.
Yeah, this is Brian Newland from IHB, and I'd be happy to just comment on that. Yeah, Mr. Bonfils, absolutely. We for a number of years now have worked with Mike Beardsley and the IT team to evaluate a lot of those controls, especially from the network side of things. So we've certainly made inquiries into the operational technology side of things, and I think that risk is especially acute given what happened in Tampa a couple of weeks ago. So so that certainly is on our radar, and we've been paying as much attention to that as we can. But in terms of from our perspective with risk, we're also going to look at remote access and the quality and the strength of the authentication controls. We would expect some of the monitoring to be increased as employees are dispersed and working remotely. So there certainly are areas of the security side that we're gonna look at.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Koblis has a question.
Yes, thanks. Brian, reading the Wall Street Journal the other day, they really believe that the water authorities are going to have a lot more penetration into their IT. So I just want to, I know Mike and I are joined at the hip on this, but it's always good to see an outside view of what we're doing, and comparative to even larger water authorities, say New York City or something like that. That are we doing the same things that they're doing, and is there anything else that we can do? It would be devastating to our reputation if anything ever happened.
Yeah, I understood and agree 100%. It's that operational technology piece is something that as I'm sure the board knows, has been at an industry level somewhat overlooked over the years, and a lot of the reason for that is just because there's no huge financial incentive at the end of that hacking rainbow, so to speak. So this was a proof of concept, I think, that happened down in Tampa. We have looked into it for Loud and Water since we've been working with you guys. So it's again something that's been on our radar for quite a few years, and we're not going to claim to be operational technology experts. There are people that are much smarter than we are at that, and we certainly know that Loud and Water has engaged those experts and conducts those tests. So we just want to make sure that the authority is kind of evaluating those on a regular basis and bringing in proper expertise to evaluate those controls.
Any other questions for the auditors? Nope, I think we're good, Brian.
Well, thank you for that. And gentlemen, I do offer both Brian and I at any point in time, if you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We appreciate your information and feedback, hearing your concerns firsthand. You know, if all goes well through the process, then we'll meet again post-audit to review the results of the audit. If there's anything significant or concerning that pops up during the audit process, we'll certainly be in touch before that point in time.
Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll set up the next meeting after the audit.
Correct. It's typically sometime in May.
Okay. I'm sure everything will go well. Well, thank you. So with that, I guess I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. This is Marty.
Second, Mark.
Okay. All in favor? I guess we'll take roll call, Jewel.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Kelly? Mr. Sultan?
Yes.
Mr. Bonfils?
Yes.
And Mr. Koblis?
Yes.
Adjourned at 8:23 a.m. Thank you.
Do you want